let's talk about our tax rules. You might not know this, but they were designed about a century ago. Yeah, for a world of factories and physical storefronts. But today, business happens online, right? It's borderless, and you don't need a physical office to make billions. And that has created this massive mismatch. And the EU is playing a really high-stakes game of catch-up. You know, this quote right here, it just nails it. For years, the digital world was kind of like the Wild West when it came to taxes. But that whole era, it's coming to an end. There's a huge global push to create what's being called a new tax world order, one that's actually built for the internet age. So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at the old rules and, why they just shattered. Then, the digital tax problem itself. After that, we'll get into the global revolution to fix it and what the EU's specific plan is. We'll even take a look at the future with crypto. And then, most importantly, we'll talk about why any of this really matters to you. Okay, so let's set the stage. Our entire tax system was built on a really simple idea. You pay taxes where you have a physical footprint. An office, a factory, something you can touch. But today, a business can be everywhere, all at once, without a single desk. And this is exactly where those old rules just start to crumble. Now, what's so fascinating here is this idea of scale without a mass. Think about it. A traditional company, it needs factories, it needs offices, a physical mass to get bigger. But a digital company? It can have millions of customers in a country without a single employee on the ground there. And that one fundamental difference, well, that's what broke the whole system.
So this whole scale without mass thing, that's where the real problem starts. And it isn't just one single issue. It's a whole bunch of challenges that these new digital business models throw at the people trying to collect taxes.
This table really breaks it down perfectly. I mean, because we, the users, are mobile, it's tough to figure out where to even charge something like sales tax. Because the business itself is mobile, it never creates a taxable presence. Things like software code, intangible assets, can be zipped over to a low-tax country with just a click. And maybe the biggest one of all, the incredible value that we all create with our data, it just isn't being properly taxed. So if there's one piece of jargon to remember, it's this one: permanent establishment. For 100 years, this has been the bedrock of international tax. If you have an office, a fixed place of business, that country gets to tax your profits. But digital companies, they just neatly sidestep this rule altogether. And this is the bottom line. This is the real kicker. A company can use a country's internet, benefit from its schools and universities, sell to millions of its people, and contribute absolutely zero in corporate income tax to that very society. So, faced with this enormous problem, countries quickly realized they couldn't go it alone. I mean, if any single nation tried to tax these giants, the company could just, move its digital address. It had to be a coordinated global response, and that led to the biggest shakeup in international tax in a century. The starting gun for this revolution was fired by the OECD with something called the BEPS Project. BEPS stands for Base Erosion and Profit Shifting, which is really just a fancy way of saying it's designed to stop huge companies from moving their profits around to avoid paying their fair share. Now, let me tell you, getting over 130 countries, each with its own agenda, to agree on anything is basically a political miracle. But this BEPS project grew into a massive global agreement that really all boils down to two core ideas. They call them the two pillars. Let's break them down. Pillar 1 is absolutely radical. It says for the biggest, most profitable companies on the planet, a slice of their profits will now be taxed based on where their customers live, not where their headquarters is. It basically creates a new digital permanent establishment. It finally catches up to that scale without mass problem. Then you've got Pillar 2. Think of this as the global safety net. It's designed to stop what they call the race to the bottom, where countries keep cutting their tax rates to attract business. Now, if a company pays less than the minimum tax in some tax haven, its home country can just step in and collect the difference, that top-up tax. There's almost nowhere to hide. Okay, so we've got this incredible global agreement. But how does the European Union actually take these huge ideas and turn them into real enforceable laws that work across all 27 of its member countries? First, let's just talk about the kind of companies we're dealing with. To even be on the radar for these new Pillar 1 rules, a company needs to have a global turnover of more than 20 billion euros. Yeah, we're talking about the absolute biggest players on the world stage. And here is the magic number for Pillar 2. The EU is officially adopting the global standard, setting that effective minimum corporate tax rate at 15%. This is the new floor. This is the baseline that will apply to all large multinational groups operating inside the EU. And it's not just about the big income taxes. The EU is also trying to make life a little bit easier for businesses when it comes to consumption taxes, or VAT. This one-stop shop idea means a company can handle its VAT for all 27 EU countries through just one registration. That's a huge headache gone for a lot of businesses. But this game of cat and mouse, it never really ends. Just when the tax authorities are getting a grip on today's digital economy, a brand new challenge is already popping up on the horizon: crypto assets. So here's the issue with crypto. Its very nature, decentralized, global, sort of anonymous, makes it incredibly hard for tax authorities to track. It's creating this massive blind spot, and that could mean a huge loss in tax revenue for countries. Now, what's really interesting is that you can see the EU has been building towards this. They've been slowly and methodically tightening the screws on tax transparency for years through these directives called DACs. They started with basic info sharing, then they went after aggressive tax schemes, then they targeted gig economy platforms. So the next logical step, DAC 8, is to bring crypto into the fold. And that brings us to DAC 8. If this thing passes, the new law would force crypto service providers, think exchanges and wallet providers, to automatically share their users' transaction data with the taxman. It's basically an attempt to pull back the curtain of anonymity for tax purposes and make sure those crypto gains get properly taxed. All right, so we've gone through a lot. Pillars, DACS, BEPS, it sounds like alphabet soup. But what does any of this actually mean for an average person? Why should you care about these super complex international tax rules? Well, when you boil it all down, this whole global revolution comes down to one single word: fairness. First, it's about making sure the biggest, most profitable companies on Earth actually contribute to the societies that help them succeed. Second, that tax money is what pays for everything we rely on: the roads, the schools, the very internet infrastructure that powers this digital economy. And third, it levels the playing field. So your local bookstore or that new tech startup has a fair shot against a global giant that used to pay almost no tax. Look, this global tax revolution is a monumental step forward. It's huge. But it does leave us with this one big, lingering question. We're closing the loopholes of today's digital world, but what about tomorrow's? As technology moves at lightning speed with things like AI and the metaverse, are tax laws always destined to be playing catch-up? That's a question we're all going to be dealing with for a long, long time.